CubeTuber.
Thank you guys for tuning in. I am the CubeTuber. Today I'm doing a special episode. I have a special video with a cube designer. I'm starting a cube designer chat series, and our first cube designer I'm talking to is Tim, aka Longnaps on Cube Cobra and also on Twitter. Hey, how's it going, Tim?
Hey, thanks for having me.
It's great to have you on the on my, I guess, show episode, my channel, I'll say. Not exactly sure how I want to do this yet. It's kind of like I want to kind of do this as a podcast, but we'll see how it goes in the future. Tim reached out to me, I would say probably last week, about talking about your cube, and you really have quite a unique cube. I was wondering if you want to just like introduce us a little bit about this cube, just kind of what it is, what's your motives behind it, and then what we're going to talk this entire episode, we'll just talk about that cube because it's really an awesome one. I think it's cool. I spent a fair bit of time looking at it. I wish I had more time like playing with it or doing something that I could talk more about it, but looking at it, it's a really neat cube.
Yeah, for sure. I think one of the reasons why I wanted to reach out was because it was so different to get into, specifically this cube, but any cube in general. Like if you like look at these 500 cards I picked out, and you don't have them in your hand, you can just start playing. You need to like theorize about what it would be like playing it. It's kind of difficult. So I think having a conversation about it and getting some input about it is really useful. I was thinking, should I maybe use screen share and just open up Cube Cobra? So yeah, my cube is the 1v1 Jumpstart EDH cube. I designed it around the idea. I'm a huge fan of the Jumpstart product that came out last year. And I started converting a lot of my pauper cubes and smaller cubes into Jumpstart boosters just to make it more convenient to start playing, because that's what I really liked about it. I'm limited is definitely my favorite format, but I always found it a bit tedious at times when I'm just, for example, with one other person that we'd have to do a draft, and it's like a suboptimal draft because we're not passing boosters, we're doing a grid draft, we're doing like a Winston draft. And in the end, the decks are okay, but they're not as powerful or not as concise as if you would do like an 8-person draft. So I said, you know what, let's just make a compromise and do these Jumpstart boosters. And that way, there's some choice in it. You can say, maybe you look at like 10 boosters, maybe look at 15 boosters, and you can pick like, oh, you know what, I want to play mono black today. And there's like vampires and vampires and zombies. And I'll just go for that. And there's some form of like you can still express yourself. You can just build your deck. It's just like a lot more controlled by the designer. Like it's pretty fixed on what like the limits are of what you can do.
Yeah, this is really cool. Jumpstart, I got into this recently just because I have run into the same problem as you. Like you have a whole cube, but drafting takes a while, and if you have like one other person, you want to sometimes those 2-player drafts can be rough. So I think Jumpstart is an awesome compromise. And how does Jumpstart work? Can you tell a little bit about people? I mean, I think most of us know Jumpstart now, but for people who don't know.
Basically, Jumpstart provides you with a booster that is like a fixed part of a deck. So let's say you would play 40 card limited decks that you would build. You would have, I don't know, some 16, 17 lands in there. And Jumpstart boosters are basically half of that 40 card deck. And they have basic lands, and they have like, I think 8 lands and 12 non-land cards. And you basically just pick 2 of those, shuffle them together, and it's a playable deck. And the product was really interesting. And if you had like 1 or 2 rares in the booster, and I mean the booster was bigger, but there were a lot more basic lands in there, but still it was a very interesting thing to open up, because you had like, you'd open a booster and it's like half of your deck. You open another one, you're like, okay, I guess I'm playing some green blue deck where I don't know what it would do. I don't have to think about what's going to happen. Like you can look through the deck, but basically you can just shuffle together, play, and if you're like, oh no, I'm not feeling Simic today, you can just open two more or like pick some older ones and shuffle up again. And it's a really great way to get a few games in that feel like limited. Like it's not very powerful. It's you're not playing combos, but there is synergy in it. Like for example, the original product had a lot of tribal themes where you have a vampire boost and you're like, well, you know, do I want to play tribal if I don't know what the other half of my booster is? But
Yeah.
it had, for example, a lot of life gain synergy in it, and then you have like a white booster that is about flyers. But your flyers, a lot of the cards have life gain synergies as well, and you have maybe something you can back from the graveyard if you gain 3 life in a turn, and there it feels more like a cohesive deck. It feels a bit more like Cube, I would say, where there's the cards are picked very, very specifically, very meticulously. It's not random that the flyer booster has a card that gains life, because white and black go well together, gaining life. And there's definitely like it's something they could have expanded on a little bit more. Like some of the themes felt a bit like, you know, that would be cool, like a 5-color thing where it's just like it's fixing, and then you just play a 5-mana 8/8. Which is like, yeah, it's fun, but like after the second time, you're like, you know what, maybe I go for something that has a little bit more synergy, a little bit more intellect behind it. But yeah, I was definitely enamored with it, because I ran into the problem that, you know, I was playing with my wife after hours, or I was playing with one friend or this other friend or like a third friend, but I never had like 4 adults in the same room. And most of the time was like after work, and people were tired, and my wife was like, you know what, I love you, but I don't want to read like 100 different cards right now and then decide what 25 of those are my favorite ones. I just want to play for like an hour and then just be done with it, and I don't have to get attached to a deck that I constructed. And it's like, for us, it was the perfect compromise.
Yeah,
to get playing.
I'm similar as you. The original Jumpstart that Wizards produced last year, I actually packed them up and played with them, but I ran into the same problem that like there is some synergy there, but it's not very high powered level, and it kind of gets boring after a while. And I even started diving into custom packs, and that's when I saw your cube, which is entirely custom packs, right? There's none any that are similar really to the Wizards original list here.
Yeah, I was really into Commander for a long time, but as I said, it was really difficult to get 4 adults from 4 different households into the same place for various hours. And after a while, we started playing like Commander decks just one-on-one, and noticed, you know what, Extort really isn't all that great if it's just one person losing a life and you're gaining one. Like a friend of mine started even constructing like brawl type decks where a lot more focused around 1v1. She even built one around the planeswalker, but still, you know, like, they had these issues where like a friend comes over and he has this like mana crypt ancient tomb, like powerful deck. Maybe he doesn't like combo off with 2 cards, but you know, he has this really like, I don't know, some banned cards even, and he's winning all the games, but really doesn't feel good. No one feels good about it. Even he is not like happy about like upheavaling for the second time, and everyone's just like, you know what, I'm fine. I don't need to keep going. And I said, you know, like a cube would be perfect, because like you can control a lot of the balance. You can just say, you know what, I don't like River's Rebuke. I don't want to bounce your whole permanence, and basically say, you know, go back to square one or stop playing. Yeah, the issue was that like making a commander deck out of like there are a lot of great commander cubes, but like drafting for like a solid commander deck that takes even more effort and even more knowledge than just a regular cube. Yeah, I was a little dismayed at first, so I thought, you know, just figure something out that feels like Brawl. Like it feels like Commander, it plays like Brawl, and it doesn't have any of the cards where you're like, you know what, I don't need to play against that deck anymore.
Okay, yeah, I mean, it looks really awesome. So Jumpstart, when you originally play it like limited, the original Wizards way, you would just take 2 packs. And here you take 3 packs, so you get a 60 card commander deck, correct?
Yeah, you get up to 60 cards. And what I like it evolved a lot over the time, but basically I decided to give a lot of information, like let you choose from a huge pool of boosters, which is 15. And I would even say, look at all 15 ones and just say pick whatever you like. For a while we did, let's make 3 groups and you pick one from each group. But after a while, we were like, well, maybe my favorite 3 boosters that all have like an artifact thing going on, they're all in the same group. And I just, I don't want to pick those 3 and have a good deck, because after all, what do you want to do is you want to have both create a deck that feels like solid, that has synergy, that gets going, where it doesn't feel like, I'm playing 3 different strategies parallel to each other, but they don't harmonize. And yeah, that's why I for 2 people, I designed it in a way where you just like, you have enough boosters. I designed 60 boosters, and that's definitely enough for you just to look at a bunch of them, just go like, what, these 3 look good. I'm gonna try this out. And sometimes we'd even be like, what, I'm gonna like prepare 3 decks. Like I figured out like a creature thing, an artifact thing, maybe, I don't know, a non-creature spell thing, a prowess deck, and I have 3 ready, and you just shuffle up, play, and what, the creature thing doesn't work, no worries, I'll just set it aside, I'll shuffle up the next one, or what, my artifact deck feels a lot more powerful, I don't know, a lot more enjoyable for both parties. And I love that.
Yeah, that's the good thing about Jumpstart is that you can kind of go onto a new deck and you don't feel like it's a huge time commitment when you're drafting and building that. So yeah. So what is the player draft? I see here it's like each player receives 15 packs. Is there any, like, it's kind of like a grid draft type of thing? How does this usually work? What's your experience doing that with your play group?
The draft of selecting boosters, I designed for a situation where you would have more players than, like, where each player couldn't have a selection of 15 boosters. So for up to 4 people, you could definitely do the one where you just like look at 15 and you could just be like, whatever 3 of the 15 floats your boat. But if you're like doing 5 to 8 people, I would say you get a group of, let's say, 7 boosters. And for now, you just like a normal draft, you don't have this information, you don't know what everyone else is doing, you're just looking at these 7, you're like, this looks interesting, I'm going to try out this booster. And then you get you pass them along to the person next to you, you get the 6 leftovers from the person next to you. But the issue I found with that was that because you make a lot more, the issue I found with that was that you have a lot less information. You might see, like, in the first booster, okay, I see 5 different strategies in these 7 boosters, and I'll just say, I'll go for the one that blinks my creatures.
Yeah.
And then the second 6 boosters out of 60, maybe you get something around blink or enter the battlefield effects, but maybe you just get like something else. So there you would have to make like a compromise where you'd be like, okay, I have blink, it's about creatures, so maybe I take another booster that wants to make tokens, and that way I can find a creature strategy. But really, I noticed that the decks became a lot less cohesive the less control you had over your choices.
Okay.
It's still like it works, but you might have the issue where someone gets very, very synergistic deck and it pops off. Okay. And everyone else is just like, okay, this is RAM, this is card draw, but none of it is really going hand in hand with each other. And it feels a little, there might be a little power disconnect where one person has a very powerful deck in the deck draft, but when everyone gets like their 15 boosters, like
it goes really well.
It's a challenge for your game knowledge, really. Like you can look at all these legendary creatures. I even tell my players that pop open the booster, to like skim through it if you really want to know, is this guy really about blink, or is it more about, I don't know, sacrificing things? Like some of the legendary creatures have like a lot of text on them.
Yeah.
So I let them get all the information in there, because in the end, afterwards, like, you have you not only have a deck like a 60-card deck that has ramp, removal, card draw, but also you have a lot of legendary creatures, at least like the 3 face cards from each booster, but I usually also have more legendaries in there. So after the deck construction, there's still like a decision you'd want to make. Who's my commander? Who's my 8th card in hand that I want to play every game? Who's like the most key card that I really need in every match?
Have you had experience? Have you had any players experience difficulty picking their commanders from these 3 packs?
Yeah.
Like what does that usually kind of entail?
I have one friend whose partner just got into Magic, who's a very strategic player and who definitely he can limit it, and then his decks are playable. But he takes a lot of time thinking about it. Like he definitely takes it all in. Sometimes he needs a little input, and what I tell him is, really pick one of them, do one game, and then if you're like, what, actually he didn't do quite a lot, and it's just a solid card, but it doesn't need to be played every match, you just slot it out, pick another one. And what fascinated me about that was that you could learn a lot about commanders. Like it's basically you're trying out 5 different mediocre limited style commander decks where they're working, you're doing something, you're playing big spells, it's fun. But you're you're figuring out, what does Prime Speaker Vannifar do? It's it's a birthing pot, but how does my deck work around it? It's quite a skill. You're confronted with a lot of new challenges where you need to figure out how do I play this commander deck that I didn't really construct. I just picked out a couple boosters, and now I'm looking at this really complex card, and it's very interesting.
I think that's a common thing. Whenever someone's kind of jumping into someone else's cube, you're kind of stuck in this weird position where you're trying to figure out what the design is behind it. So that's interesting. You notice that. But talking about power level, because we were talking about the commanders and just certain ones that work and ones that maybe take a little bit more effort to get them online. What would you say is the power level of this Jumpstart cube? Because I know it's kind of this may even be a moot point, because when we talk about cubes, you compare it to vintage cube and stuff. I'm just kind of curious what ideally power wise the experience that you're trying to get from players, because you said in the past, I think even in this description here, you're not looking for a big insurrection type of spell that just kills the opponent outright. Could you elaborate more on that?
Yeah, for sure. Since you're playing 1v1, a lot of these big I win cards don't even work the same way you'd want to. For example, Insurrection is a lot less interesting if it's just one opponent. And I think it's difficult to compare it to one exact cube, but I'd say you definitely have this commander feeling where both players or all players are doing their thing. It's a lot less, it doesn't feel like standard. You're okay, I know what deck you're playing, I'm going to keep up this removal spell or this counter spell, or I'm not going to play into Wrath. It's this format feels a lot more I'm trying to set up my thing. I'd say it's a very non-toxic commander vibe, where everyone's just I have an enchantment deck. I'm not just going to play all the enchantment removal, or I don't play a non-creature deck with just board wise, but everyone's still is I'm doing my thing. I want to get some synergies going. And in the end, it's about how who sequences better, who starts attacking better, who can read an advantage better. And I have situations where when we both end up with powerful decks, it would be I've got my turn and I'm popping off, extra mana, play a third creature, some more cards, and then my board gets pretty big. I start attacking for 10 damage, and I'm okay, you know what? I'm definitely getting there. I even have a removal spell left over for next turn, and I pass to my friend, and his turn basically goes the same. Like he's like, okay, you know what? I'm trading treasures.
Cool.
Like he gets there, and his board gets big as well. He gets rid of my commander. You know, something goes on there, and you're like, okay, it gets quite complex, like a normal commander game, where you're like, you know, there's a lot of different variables. I don't really like. I might be winning, but I don't know what's going to happen in the next turn.
Yeah, I like
that was really.
I like that you say that, because I think with Commander, I mean, I'd say 90% of the games that I play with a bunch of people, they kind of end in like someone getting upset, or there's a little bit of toxicity where people combo off, or so having that environment, having a kind of I'm going to say fair for better, for just a, I don't know a better word else I could say. I think that's quite interesting. That's kind of why I'm driven to that. And I think actually Jumpstart in this Commander format kind of makes sense out of out of many of the Commander decks that Commander cubes that I've looked at. It's really interesting. One thing I'm kind of curious that you would like to elaborate on, because when you designed this this cube around Jumpstart, why did you choose the rules that you chose? Like, we go over some of them? Especially, I'm really interested in some of the restrictions you picked, and just some your thought process behind them, because some like I'll let you talk about this, and then I'll try to jump in when I can. All right?
Yeah, for sure. I'll start off like I lowered the starting life total to 30. I think on Magic Arena the historic role has 25 life, and I picked 30 because with Jumpstart it is really difficult to design aggro, because you would really have to get 3 aggro boosters together to make a viable aggro deck. Because if you're looking like at a hand with, I don't know, some burn and some 1-mana creatures, and you just like have a 3-mana rock and a 6-mana spell, and it doesn't quite work out. So that's one of the some of the restrictions with designing Jumpstart, is that some of these very specific things, like playing pure control, like draw go control, it would be terribly difficult to find the right boosters, to have the game knowledge about the cube and about all these cards, where you're like, okay, these 3 are definitely going to make a good like full control deck. In the end, I felt like 30 life is fair, because you don't have so much aggro in there that like 25 you would die too fast, and you get time to set up, where like your opponent might just like, I don't know, have a Voltron commander attacking you for 10, but you have, like, you don't need to top deck something right now. You could still like set up for a turn, ramp, draw, and then the turn after you deal with whatever's coming your way. But still definitely something I could see adjusting. I omitted the commander damage, for one thing, because the life total was so small to begin with, that 21 damage from a commander or 30 in total, there's not a huge gap in between there. And I don't feature a lot of life gain synergies. So there are not boosters that are entirely, like just I keep getting life and like generating value and counters, whatever, that you don't run the risk that games go on for too long. That's something I tend to design in most of my cubes. I like that, you're always attacking in a way, lowering life totals. You're encouraged to go on the offensive and not to just wall up and like, I don't know, try to deck your opponent. And the commander color identity rule does not apply. That's just because it would be impossible to play your deck. You might have like an Abzan booster, a green booster, and I don't know, a Golgari booster, and you want to play the Golgari commander. There's white cards in your deck. It doesn't work out. So this is kind of a given. And this one is a little bit more complex, where I found out that when you started playing one-on-one, the amount of targets you have for targeted removal is a lot fewer. It's a lot more obvious what you want to deal with. When you have 3 opponents, you might want to get rid of 1 commander, but there's still 2 other people staring down at you. And with one-on-one, it's a lot more obvious. And most of the time, the commander is by far the most important creature. Sometimes it even just makes your deck work. If you don't have the commander in play, it's just you're doing stuff, but it doesn't feel as explosive and as fun, where like you're doing various things in a turn. So what I said was, okay, if you're playing 1v1, you get an emblem that says you cast your commander from the command zone, and you get basically this turn and the next turn to do something with it, whether it be attack and trigger an attack, or tap it to activate an ability, or I don't know, do whatever, use 5 mana, or like activate Golos, like do something with your commander. If I, for like, let's use that as an example. I use Golos as my commander, and like maybe he costs 7 mana to cast, and then the ability is 7 mana. I'm not going to have 14 mana probably in my turn.
No.
You know, but there's just so many Grim Monoliths you can go around. So basically, you'd be sitting there like with your, I don't know, blue-black deck, and you'd just be like, well, you know, I just have to deal with it every time he has enough mana to cast him, and all of the rest of this deck might just be like some jumbled five color stuff. There, I felt like, you know, if both parties have the advantage, it doesn't really feel unfair. It's something like I actually printed out like physical, like the proxy token.
You printed out emblems?
Yeah,
emblems? Oh, nice. Okay.
Yeah, I used to design custom cards, so I was like, okay, you know, we're going to need this, because most of the time we forgot about it.
Yeah.
And it's something, it definitely changes how you plan your turns, because you don't have to think about, you know, I might spend my whole turn casting my commander, and it's just going to be like, you know, just Doomblade that and find 2 more mana and cast it again.
So you can, where did you I'm sorry to interrupt, but where did you come up with that idea of gaining hexproof until the end of next turn? I mean, is that something that you did, or did you see that in another cube and you were like, that was just seemed like a good idea for what?
I think it started out when I was playing with a friend who, I don't remember the commanders yet, but it was definitely like one of those, you know, you need to untap and then tap your commander to get something. I think it was Garth, the one that just like it can give you a Black Lotus or something, where, you know, activating him once, it's like, it's not going to win you the game. It's like, it might be a Terror, it might be a Black Lotus, but it's, you know, it's fine. And we'd say, you know, like getting 1 activation would be fair. I was playing some deck where I think I played Kess, where you can get once a turn, you can get a instant or sorcery from your graveyard. So I would play a removal spell, and then next time she'd cast it, I would play it out of the graveyard, and she would get really frustrated because she didn't have haste. So I said, you know what, let's next match we're going to be like, I'll give you a turn, like you get 1 activation, and then I can Doomblade it the next turn. And we noticed that it wasn't like it didn't break the game. Like I could still use removal on her other creatures, or counter whatever else was going on. And from that, I started to, like my design philosophy was, let's start making a rule and then dial it back down afterwards. Where I would say, you know, let's give him 2 turns, and then after a while we'd be like, okay, 1 turn at the end of the turn. And then I'd say, well, at the end of the turn, I can't have my creature in the same turn, so we go for the next turn. And since the wording already existed in the game, at the end of your next turn, I said, you know, that's probably something that most players can understand. And, you know, in the end, these are all things like you could play this cube and just say, like, you know what, I don't like this emblem, I don't have to play with it. There's nothing forcing you to do it. It's something that I find enriches the experience.
Now the more I look at it, the more I like that, actually. At first I was kind of like, oh, that's weird, and now that I think about it, and the more, especially after hearing your explanation, I quite like that. So it's very good. What about the gods lose indestructible? Did you find that was a problematic?
I thought it was, yeah, for sure. I think this one is definitely one what I could see in the future, saying, you know what, maybe just let's try playing with indestructible gods. But since you don't draft your deck, you might like, let's say we have gods, we have this commander cube, and you'd be like, you know what, last time I lost to this, I don't know, someone played Perforos and just a bunch of tokens, and he burned me out, and I couldn't do anything about it. And you'd be like, okay, you know what, this time I'm going to go, I don't know, white and black, and I'm going to get all the exile targeted removal, and I'm just going to get rid of it every time. That would work in a normal cube, but this time in this cube, you're looking at boosters that I designed, and you know, obviously I try to rather go for like exile and non-land permanent than saying destroy creature, because it gives you a lot more options dealing with non-land permanents or exiling permanents. But there's just so much to go around, and this cube is singled. And so after a while, you know, if you have 60 boosters, you might not find even 60 different removal spells that might exile creatures. So if you're staring down a god and you figure out after like 2 matches, you know what, I just don't have exile based removal, you just can't do anything about it. And there's not a lot of them in there. I have Perforos in there that can sneak attack in creatures. If you have devotion, it's basically just like this
that's probably
all you can't deal with. You need to chump block. It's like, I think it's like a 7/6. You need to start chump blocking it after a while. You can't get through it. And I felt that if there's only one person who can answer this indestructible creature, it's a lot more difficult. There's a lot more pressure on this person to actually find something. If it's commander, if you're playing with 4 people, okay, there's an indestructible creature, but there's also like 3 other players who have like made combos or a lot of creatures or life gain going on, where it balances itself out a bit more.
I see.
And that's why I also had the Scarab God and Locust God not returned from the graveyard, because I said, you know what, there are absolutely powerful creatures even without the last bit on their flavor on their text box.
Yeah.
And you might probably just play them as a commander anyways, and you can play them again from the command zone. It's almost the same. Obviously, it's not as good, but it's still like.
But yeah, there's still good cards. I can see why you made that choice. Let's talk a little bit about the mana. It says every booster comes with a thriving land. Do you run any other mana? Because I looked at it and it looks like there's some other mana choices that you have in each pack.
Yeah, for sure. Hold on, I'm gonna pull up the list. First thing you notice is that there's not the usual color separated columns. It's because I changed the sort to sort by the tags, so you could see only the cards that are in each booster. I'm just gonna show you. There's a lot of them, 16 total, and there's one part that just says other, whether it's just cards that I haven't put in boosters yet. Okay. But basically, all of these boosters are made up of 12 non-land cards and non-basic lands. And you're wondering, like, isn't it supposed to be 20 cards? It is. And when you're playing, it's definitely 20 cards. And what I'm showing here are the cards that are non-basic lands and non-land cards. So for example, for Adel in the mono-white commander, you've got these 15 cards. You would add to that one thriving land, which is a land. There were also gates printed recently in Commander Legends that basically have one color, and you choose the second one and enters tapped. It's basically a gate where you can choose which way you're fixing you want it to go. And so what you would do here is it's 15 cards, 1 thriving land, and 4 basic planes that would make up this booster, and this is how I have it. This is how I have it like designed in paper.
Now, what about? Sorry to interrupt. What about certain ones? Like there's Atraxa counters that has. Well, there's going to be a few colors there. So how do you break down those lands, and how comes you don't include like 1 plains, 1 mountain, 1 forest? Or I guess Atraxa doesn't have mountain, does she? But yeah,
the only one she doesn't have.
Yeah, that's the only one. So that was a poor example.
For sure. What I did is I definitely switched them around a lot, and I figured out that after a while, it seems a little too basic. But depending on how many colors are in the commander, like the commander needs to function. In Atraxa's case, that would be 4. I would have 4 lands that would fix for this mana, where for example, if it's a 4-color commander, would be important to have some cards that any color, which the vivid cycle does. So she got 1 vivid card. And what does she have? She has Mana Confluence, which is just perfect fixing. And she has, I think, Forge of Heroes is not fixing. It's like this is the 5th non-basic land. But doesn't fix, counters. But she has 4 because she has 4 colors. She has a Path of Ancestry, which comes into play tapped. Afterwards can scry, and she has a Water Regrave because another thing I noticed is that if you look at the list in a regular way and you see all the lands compiled on land station, you have obviously you have like fetch lands, you have shock lands. You don't have the original duels, but you have more lands that have the double land typing, for example, island and swamp. And I noticed that sometimes you'd get like, for example, a Trexa and a different booster that has a Bloodstained Mire. And you'd be like, oh man, I really, I'm missing blue. And I think I have like, or like I need a second blue. I have an island in play. I don't think I have a second island. You could get a Watery Grave. So I noticed that having like with these multicolored commanders, it would be important to have like either a fetch land or have a card like even the Tri-lands that has multiple land types. And so Atraxa has 4 cards that can create multiple colors. Watery Grave is like the most narrow one of them. But if we look, for example, at Brago, which is Azorius commander, he only needs 2 colors, and he got in a Darker Wastes and in a Mystic Gate, which only produce white and blue. He also has the Thriving Land, though. So if you would have, for example, Atraxa as your commander, but Brago is part of your deck, you would think, well, this is kind of terrible because I need 4 colors and like a third of my deck only wants to produce white and blue. You'd still have the 3, like from the 3 boosters, you have still 3 thriving lands.
Okay.
Like once you have 1 mana confluence or like one of these any color lands in play, you can definitely do most of what you wanted to do. But funnily enough, I found out that picking multicolored boosters, and especially ones with 3 or more colors, helps you more in casting all of the cards than picking 3 monocolored boosters. Because say I would go, I'm going to pick Adeline, and what else do we have monocolored? Drana as the mono black reanimator, and even maybe Felden. Yeah, okay, I got creatures, I'm reanimating them, putting them in the graveyard. But what you have is you have 3 boosters where he has, he doesn't really have this. He has Castle Embereth, he has Spinerock Knoll, he has 1 thriving land and like 5 mountains. And maybe Drana is your commander, and you have this deck with like 5 mountains and 5 plains, and like you have 5 swamps, but this is just a third of your basics are the colors that you need to cast your commander, and it's there it is where it gets tricky. So I'd even say to some people, try to stay away from having too many monocolor cards. Where if you have like, for example, you have like your apps and your Golgari boosters, you'd be like, okay, one of the 3 colors can be monocolored, and still it will work out. But if you like drop a mono blue commander in there, you might have some issues casting your absent commander.
I see. Okay, very interesting. Very interesting. Let's see here. Well, actually, so here's a question that I have for you. So if you're playing this, what would be your ideal pick? Like what pack really sticks out to you personally that you'd be like, oh, this is one pack that I just can't avoid. I got, when I see it, I gotta grab it.
I'm definitely a sucker for value. I'm not proud to say that I enjoy playing Simic.
Okay.
I try to be non-toxic about it and not take 15 hours with my turns. But something like Tulane, where you would get, what do you get? A card, and you can put a land into play, and you can return your creatures to hand. And what do you have in there? You have some cards that, for example, have Cascade and do something when they enter the battlefield, or you have other cards that bounce your creatures back to your hand. And in general, you just like, you could pick Tulane and just any 2 other boosters that have anything to do with these colors and creatures, and play Tulane as your commander and just generate value and play like a fair, I'm attacking, I'm blocking, I'm drawing some cards. I'm definitely into that. Actually, let's just pull up the play test. And I have, I actually put up the the draft version where you pick from a group and then you get another one. But since for me, it's definitely the suboptimal way to play, and it's not what I intended. I intended for 1 to 4 players to be able to select 1 of 15 boosters. What I've done is that I've just took all the face commander cards.
I see. Okay, so this is how you would do this. Okay,
this is basically what the table looks like if you draft it. There would be like these burger token cases, and there will be the commander in front, and then the other 19 cards below it. And obviously, you could like pull everything out. But are you going to pull out 15 boosters and just look through all those cards? No,
no,
you're probably going to read all the commanders and like figure something out there. So if we look at this right now, I mean, if you play CDH, you're looking at Kenrith and thinking, oh boy, I'm going to make someone very unhappy playing this card. But it's like you can't abuse him as well. You can have like these 2-card combos or 1-card combos with your commander that you would have in a normal commander game. It's you really have to look at him as a pretty fair card where you're like, you know what, 5 mana, get a 5/5, and then next turn reanimate something. It's not terrible, but really the upside to Kenrith, if I look at him right now, is like I'm 5 colors. I can play powerful spells, and I have a very good fixing already in this booster. But let me take a second and see what else do I got here. I already see 2 cards that care about the graveyard. I have Carador and Abzan. That he's interested in creatures in your graveyard to cast them for cheap and then get to cast 1 creature every turn. And Muldrotha is pretty similar. I think Muldrotha is probably my pet commander. It's what I'm playing on Arena and in paper if I get the chance. And Muldrotha definitely like I can show you afterwards like how you can get the graveyard going, because you'd be like, you know, I need to mill myself, I need to discard cards, and how can I do that if only a third of my deck is interested in the graveyard? That's why like I would say if you were like interested in the graveyard into doing some value stuff from there, you would say, I want to play Muldrotha. You could go for Carador. Carador definitely gets creatures in the graveyard. Kethis is interested in having legendaries in the graveyard, but he doesn't like he's not as active about like milling or so. He's more about playing legends, have a lot of legendary cards. So if you have 3 in the graveyard, you can just get rid of 2 and play the 3rd. You have Cedrus, which just gives all your creatures on Earth. There I would be like, well, you're 3 colors here, you're dipping into a 4th. You would dip here into a 4th as well. If you play all 3, you'd be 5 colors. It's a little ambitious. Like 3 color boosters have 3 non-basic lands that fix well. Most of them have like a trio maybe that can have all 3 colors, but going 5 colors is ambitious. What would be easier to play would be Marin, because she's interested in having creatures go to your graveyard. So you'd have Secure Tribe Elder, for example, as ramp, where it's a creature, it dies, it's in your graveyard, you'd want to get it back a couple turns just to keep ramping. And she definitely goes well with Muldrotha because she's interested in creatures. Those are permanents. You can get those back with Muldrotha. And maybe as a third, I think you could look at either Kethis or Cedrus here, or Carador. And I think the best choice here would be Muldrotha and Carador and Marin.
Yeah, that does look good.
And before I'll show you the 3 boosters, maybe like, are you looking at some of those where you're like, I would love to play one of these? And
I mean, I would maybe look at Alesha. I don't know the guy's name next to him, the Artificer.
This guy.
And then next to Cedrus, I can't read that name either.
Hoffrey,
maybe. I don't know about that. I'd maybe actually probably have to look at the tiefling down there. I can't recall his name either now. The text is a little blurry for me. There we go. So that may be my pick, but yet again, that's just kind of like blind looking there. But I quite like that, because I tried play testing this once before and I didn't quite get it. So now having you kind of show me that, I'm very interested in this now.
For me, that's one of the bigger challenges of getting the cube to be more approachable, to be they're less of a hindrance into understanding it, wanting to play it. Because with usual cubes you can just like look at the cards and be like, well, I recognize this looks like fun. And here you need to use a lot of imagination to figure out, what would my deck be like if I wanted to play Alesha as my commander. So what I would do right now is like just go for
let's do it. Alesha,
those 3. And basically, like, the draft doesn't do anything special anymore. I just let it get rid of all the other cards, and you get stuck with these three, and it's like doesn't really tell you anything. But what you could do would be like, okay, I have Marin, I have Muldrotha and Carador, and what I can do is go to the list.
Yep.
And this is like definitely something where I recognize that it's not very, very friendly to someone who is not familiar with this cube, but like I would right now find
the packs,
boosters. Yeah.
Yep.
Well, did I have Carador Creature Graveyard, and I take the name of the tag, and I'd set a filter where it says I only want cards that are featured in the tag Carador Creature Graveyard, or I'm going to find, what is that? Muldrotha is right here.
Yeah, Muldrotha was the other one.
I gave them like rough keywords, so it's not too long, but you can get like a gist about what you're trying to do with it. I use the quotation marks because it's that way you wanted to find the very specific phrasing you're putting. Was the third one Carador? Wait, do we already?
No, it wasn't Carador. It was
Marin.
Marin, yes.
All right.
Yeah,
so let's pull up Marin.
Yeah, because that's all graveyard center.
Yeah, we have our four-color graveyard deck.
Right there would be our deck.
Right there would be our deck. First of all, I would say, what would I be interested in playing as my commander? Muldrotha is my pet card. I think I would first try to make like a Muldrotha deck work. But since you're not changing anything about a deck, you're basically just shuffling it up and playing. It's right now, it's just a decision. Do I want to play Muldrotha? Do I want to play Marin? Do I want to play Carador? What else do I have? I have Teneb in here. Yeah. He's like not as powerful, but it's like still a fun commander. You have Shigeki who can mill, but it's not really like a payoff card. But for example, in Marin, you have a very powerful Yawgmoth, where if you were in like if you had different boosters with Marin that are more centric around making tokens, you could definitely go for like Yawgmoth as your commander. But for now, I'd say, I'd go for Muldrotha, and in her booster, you can find a lot of cards that mill besides doing something else. All of the boosters come with 3 ramp cards. I made sure that's like the baseline sum. If you have like a Zakama that costs 9 mana, you might even have a 4th or a 5th piece of ramping, but the baseline is always 3 cards of ramp. In this case, we have Network Terminal as fixing ramp, and then you could, like, if you have nothing going on, you could tap in another artifact to loot. You have Skull Prophet for ramp, which can need it for ramp
and mill you,
and then the third piece, the assistant. So your ramp still does have some synergy with your graveyard, and then you'd have at least 2 pieces of removal. Here right now, I see, for example, Shriekmaw, which is great because it's basically a sorcery speed Doomblade that leaves a creature. So you could always, with Muldrotha in play, you can play a 2-mana Doomblade every turn.
Yep.
And same thing with Binding of the Old God. And right now you might be thinking, wow, this is terribly broken, but
it's
this
good.
Is just, yeah, it's definitely good. If you would play a 20-card Muldrotha commander deck with just these cards, that would be, I think, would be really boring, but it would be really powerful. But you still have 2 other boosters, and Marin, for example, is a lot more interested in having creatures die and doing something on enter the battlefield. So she has Midnight Reaper for card advantage. She's Playcrafter-like effects where both players sacrifice a creature. So how this would have synergy with Muldrotha, for example, is that you have Muldrotha in play and you can play a Playcrafter every turn, sacrifice it, so you get it back into the graveyard. Because sometimes you have the issue that, for example, a Ravenous Chupacabra that just 4 mana comes into play, destroys a creature, it sticks around, and you don't have a way to get back in the graveyard, but you need another removal spell. So this way, with Muldrotha, you could go in a direction where you could have a Playcrafter every turn. And if your opponent doesn't create tokens or has a lot of creatures out, that might be really strangling them out of the game. But not in a way where you can't get around it. There's definitely a lot of ways to to not lose the game to that. And she has different kind of removal. She has Secure Tribe Elder, Diligent Farmhand, some creature-based removal that when they die and she's out, you can get them back. You can also get them back with Muldrotha. So you can see, there's a lot of overlap. Yeah, right.
Yeah, it's nice.
And over here, I think Carador is really similar to Men in a way that you have creatures that ramp, do something else, and then they end up in the graveyard. Shigeki is great because you can play it over and over again, find a land, ramp in that sense, and afterwards you can get cards back. He also has just a talisman, like
some ramp there,
regular ramp. With the talismans and the signets as well, it was kind of difficult finding a reason to put them into a booster because there's just 10 signets and 10 talismans. But you have 60 boosters, so who gets this like crazy 2-mana ramp? Who gets the Soul Ring? And for example, with Soul Ring, I ended up not putting it into the cube.
That's probably a good choice, I think. Just giving someone that power is pretty.
From Commander, the opening hand with like 2 lands and a Soul Ring is always great. Like you just get going, and the disparity with like having access to it, even just in your deck, having a deck with the Soul Ring in it is a lot more powerful than the one that doesn't. But the signets and the talismans felt still fair enough, and I would make sure that you don't just have, for example, you just don't just have the 3-mana removal, but you have some lower costed ones, and maybe you have, if it's an expensive commander, you have like a 4-mana card that ramps for 2. But in the end, I think the Muldrotha deck would end up really, really, really fun.
It looks like a fun deck. Just that, for example, you breaking it down like that looks a lot of fun. Definitely something that I would want to pick and play. We have to get ending our episode shortly here, so I want to say, what is one piece of advice for someone who would be? What's one piece of advice you would give to someone building a Jumpstart Commander cube similar to yours? If someone's like, if they hear this and they think this is what I want to build, what is one piece of advice that you want to give to them?
I think to start out, I wouldn't worry too much about singleton. I wouldn't worry too much about how many cards in each color are represented. I wouldn't worry about that at all. I would look at the commander you want to design, and that's actually something I wanted to post on Reddit at some point, where I would ask people to give the essential 20. What are the essential 20 cards that could represent your commander deck? Like, what is the most important ramp? What's the most important removal? What are the most important lands you would put in your, I don't know, Kozilek commander deck? Where like it gets you thinking about like which of these cards are actually really important, and which are like the 80th cards, which is the 90th card, which are the ones that like really are the essence of it. And I think that's a great way to going about it. That's how I started. We took like I said, I love Muldrotha. What are my 10 little cards that I would definitely want to have for the Muldrotha? And I think if we go about it that way, and you'd say, every commander deck needs ramp, you would always need some removal, and I ended up with 3 ramp cards, 2 removal cards. You could do a different balance there, but as long as you have some as long as you streamline it a little bit, where every booster has like a similar makeup, that you would always have a deck with removal and with a certain number of RAM cards. I think you could do whatever. You could unpower it. You could be like, okay, no signets, no talismans. I want this to be slow. I want this to be about combat, or I want to make it should be about combos. I want these broken cards, but they're in different boosters. So you would have to really understand what's going on. I think it could go in a lot of different directions, and in the end, you forget about having 2 of each color, 2 of each guild, 2 of each tri lands, and just make 8 white commanders and go nuts. You don't really have to. It's not about draft. You don't need to have this balance first. You could, if color is what works, you can go for that.
I think a lot of designers get caught up in that aesthetic, like, hey, I need to have this many of each guild and stuff. And I like hearing you say that don't worry about that. Like, do what works for your cube. You know, you can play test it and figure out what works.
With Jumpstart, there's a lot fewer rules that regular cube design has that you really need to adhere to. A lot of Jumpstart designers are very strict on the the balance of cards, where it needs to have a certain exact amount of removal. I think you could be a little more open about that. But if you always have some removal, some ramp, and some card draw, like what else you need in a commander deck? It could be the theme of your commander. It could be anything. You know, you still have a playable deck.
Yep, I think that is the key there. All right, well, before we go, do you want to shout out your Twitter, or where can people reach you if they want to reach you?
Yeah, for sure. My Twitter is at long_naps. I will definitely send you a link for those. And I'm also Longnaps without any dashes on Cube Cobra. But I think the easiest way to contact me would be Twitter or Reddit. On Reddit, I'm long-naps. And I think we'll put maybe some links. I'll put some links in the comments to the video.
Well, I'll put links in the video description. So no worries about that. I'll make sure they're in the video description below. Let's just sign out here. And
yeah, thanks for having me.
This is CubeTuber. Go ahead, Tim.
Thanks for having me. I hope we can get a discussion going about the topic.
Yep.
It was really fun chatting with you about it.
Yep. Hopefully I'll have you on again another time in the future where I look at another cube, or maybe if we want to come back and revisit this one. Sounds great. Thanks again, Tim.